The Trap Set will always be available for free, but we rely on donations from our listeners. Please visit our website at thetrapset.net and click donate. Subscribe to our show on iTunes, and if you enjoy what you hear, give us a review.
This episode of The Trap Set is brought to you in part by Colectivo Coffee, handmade coffee since 1993. Check them out online at colectivo.com. This is Joe Wong. Welcome to The Trap Set, where each week we explore the lives of drummers. I'm going to play something for you. You're hearing Mammoth by Interpol, featuring my guest, Sam Fogarino, on drums. Formed in 1998, Interpol quickly rose to the top of the competitive and robust New York rock scene, at a time when all eyes seemed to be on that city's musical output. Their early sound drew comparisons to seminal Manchester bands such as Joy Division and The Smiths. But with each successive album, Interpol has expanded its already impressive sonic palette. Interpol writes as a group, instead of having a principal songwriter. So Sam isn't only the drummer, he's an integral creative partner in a collaborative collective. But as a drummer, Sam's hypnotic and hook-laden playing could be considered the foundation of the band's success, and his background as a recording engineer helps him craft a distinctively powerful sound. I recorded this interview in Sam's room at the Ace Hotel in downtown Los Angeles. Sam was gearing up to perform at Coachella and was gracious enough to make time for me before playing in front of thousands of people later that day. I found Sam engaging and affable, and he even ordered me an iced coffee, which you can hear clanking in the background. And now our interview with Sam Fogarino.
My mom was a bartender, and my father was a welder.
Oh, cool.
And they never lived together. They were always separated. But my dad was around every weekend. And
so he would come over to your mom's house?
Yeah, and spend the weekend, hang out. You know, he wasn't like a absentee dad.
Did he weld at a factory, or was he like an artist welder?
No, it was at a factory. But he was an artist, though. He did paint.
Okay.
And my mother is a piano player. So there was always something creative happening. They just had that air to them. You know, young, kind of hipster.
Were they really young when they had you?
Yeah, my mother was 25.
That's not so young by the standards of that time.
No. Well, it was her second child.
Okay. With your dad or a different guy?
With a different man.
Okay. So you have an older sibling?
I have a sister.
With your mom? And then does your dad have other kids as well?
No.
Okay.
No.
So your sister and you all and your mom all lived together in one house?
In one house.
And then on the weekends your dad would come over?
He'd come over.
Did your sister have a relationship with her father?
No, because he had already passed away.
Okay, got it.
And my father adopted my sister.
Got it.
So I never used the term. I didn't even know what a half-sister was until I was about 10 years old.
Right.
And I was like, oh, that doesn't count here.
Right.
I just couldn't. It wouldn't. I was so close. We're still very close. I was so close to her that I couldn't imagine, diminishing our relationship.
What kind of stuff was your sister into?
She was a typical young girl. She's 5 years older than me, and she was just into, kind of pop music. But, growing up in the 70s, a lot of pop radio was so much different. FM radio was like the thing.
A mixed bag,
yeah. Yeah, it was a mixed bag, and it was kind of new and adventurous. So through my mother and my sister, stuff would bleed down to me. And, my sister was responsible for me being turned on to The Clash, because she bought the Train in Vain single, which I thought was great, but then I flipped it over and it was London Calling on the other side.
Right.
You know, and she turned me on to like the Cars and stuff that, you know, if it wasn't something really pivotal, it was something that led to, you know, other musical forms. Like the Cars really kind of broadened my horizons.
It's a gateway drug.
It's a total gateway drug.
So what sparked the move down to Florida?
Well, I lived in West Philadelphia, and it was kind of the epitome of a disenfranchised, like, you know, kind of forgotten neighborhood. And my sister decided to go to university in Florida, so my mother saw it as an opportunity to kind of get me out of a dead-end situation. And it worked, really.
Did you feel like you were in a dead-end situation at the time? You were, what, 13, 14?
Yeah, I was approaching 15. Not totally dead end, but I knew there was something else. You know, so I was, on one hand, I was frightened to leave what I'd known all my life, but then on the other hand, I was like, well, let's you know, kind of see what's ahead.
Had you started playing drums by then?
Yeah.
And were you in a band?
I had a band. I had a young band that played at my grade school.
Nice. What kind of stuff did you play?
Stones and The Who, and, you know, kind of 60s, early 70s kind of classic rock, until we wrote 3 original songs, and that's...
Do you remember how the original songs go?
Vaguely. I remember more of the feeling of being elated that, you know, we actually wrote music.
Yeah.
You know, no one over the age of 16 in the band.
I remember when I first started playing drums with other musicians, it really sparked something inside of me, and I was like, okay, this is what I want to do. This is me. This is my identity. Did you have a similar experience?
I did. I think that I had a slow development as a drummer before I started playing with people, because it didn't capture me. Because I was into songs. Like, it wasn't necessarily I need to play drums for drumming's sake. It was like, I want to be involved in a collective, that an ensemble that makes songs.
Mm-hmm.
And when I started doing that, it was like a drug.
Mm-hmm.
I just couldn't wait. And I would practice by myself and try to push myself a little bit, but I always felt that I excelled when we were working on songs or learning songs at that young age, and that's when I kind of would hit another level. Oh, that's how you do a double stroke roll, or whatever little kind of, you know, rudimentary thing would kind of
Did you study
itself.
with somebody?
Never.
Okay.
No.
All right, well, tell me what was going on with you in your 20s. So you're down in Florida.
Down in Florida.
Did you go to college?
I went to a 2-year school for audio engineering.
Okay.
And then quickly realized that I just wanted to play music too bad. You know, it's just... so I started playing in this band called the Holy Terrors. That was... it was like I often call it my first real band, because their songs were detailed and intricate without being alienating. You know, there was just really smart chord changes, and the lyrics were really insightful and informed, and you know, it was loud. You know, it's kind of a Pixies-esque, Sonic Youth, like that branch of like punk rock. You know, an interpretation of punk rock.
Mm-hmm.
And I was in love with it, and you know, we put out a couple singles that did, and again, Milwaukee comes up.
All right.
I remember that there was the public radio station there.
Or the college radio station, maybe.
I think there was a public radio station.
WUWM.
Something like that.
Okay.
And I remember we charted on that station, and like...
Oh, that would have been WMSE then. Yeah.
Whatever it was.
I think they're going to start carrying this show, so it'll all come full circle.
Yes. Well, just being like, sandwiched between Pavement and, Silver Jews or something like that, it really, it felt validating.
But that was the only station you guys charted on?
No, that sticks out in my head because I remember their top 20 or whatever. I liked like every band on it.
Yeah, I mean, I would listen to that station every Wednesday night. They had a show that I just loved, and that was educating me in high school. I would just, yeah, I mean, that was a very important outlet for me at the time.
Yeah, I mean, it's
so in your 20s, you're charting on college charts.
Yeah.
Were you able to make any money?
No.
So what were you doing to support yourself?
Anything. It's just pumping gas, delivering pizza, working at record stores, record distributors, anything like that. Just enough to pay the rent, It was all about the band,
Didn't you get asked to join Marilyn Manson for
did.
a minute? Yeah, okay. Well, tell me how that happened.
Well, the Holy Terrors shared Marilyn Manson's management at the time. And I remember, this is 1994, so no cell phones, no email. And I remember getting a message from Brian Warner. And we were definitely acquainted and friendly, but, we didn't talk on the phone. So it's like, well, this is about two things. Marilyn Manson wants Holy Terrors to open for them, which I was hoping for, or they want me to join the band. What they wanted to get from me, what Brian liked, what he perceived that I was doing within the Holy Terrors that made him want me to join the band wasn't going to happen in Marilyn Manson because it's just not the same music. I didn't know how to shift that. And so we had this awkward conversation, and he kind of just, popped the question, and I told him I was thrilled, but I need to keep doing what I'm doing. And the ironic thing is my father was very angry at me.
Really?
Yeah.
Because
he thought that...
Were they popular at that point?
Yeah.
Like outside of Florida?
Yeah.
It was when they had released the Eurythmics cover and they were getting huge?
It was before that.
Oh, okay.
But they were bubbling under. I think Brian Warner had been on a couple talk shows already.
Okay.
So America was discovering who they were, and
so
it was
your
that
dad
initial...
your dad was bummed out that
pissed.
You weren't. He was like, he was on Jerry Springer, man. You got to think about your career.
He really kind of took that kind of fatherly attitude, and I was like, you're really defeating the purpose here, Dad.
All right. Well, so tell me about how you made the decision to move to New York.
It was on a whim. It was actually...
The band broke up first?
No, I left the band.
Okay.
They continued on, and...
what made you decide to leave the band?
Time. 5 years had gone by, and we'd kind of missed... There was that period in the pre-Nirvana where, bands, you could still kind of build up a following and, get some press and some airplay by putting out a 7-inch. And we put out a couple 2 years in a row, and they both were equally pretty well received, one better than the other. And that would have been the time to kind of get in the van and, go play these places that, where we're getting radio play or, at the times we were getting good, favorable reviews and press and stuff, and we kind of missed the window. And then we finally put out a record that in 1994 we finally put out a full length and, did a couple weeks on the road up and down the East Coast, and it was just bleak. It was just such a dense kind of playing field. And, we didn't have the right label and all that, and I just got really frustrated.
Part of the punk ethos is to sort of shun popularity.
Yeah.
But of course, most people want to be popular or want to at least be successful enough so that they can do music and not have to do anything else.
Yeah, I
so
find that
did you have that conflict?
No, I found that to be very pretentious, and passive aggressive. I didn't understand it because
I've always thought, like you were talking before about people that came from a privileged background.
Yeah.
I feel like that attitude comes from people with the luxury
they
to not worry about it, that don't have to worry about it.
Yeah, and there's this kind of, I do appreciate like the kind of whimsy of it all, and to not, to kind of have a loose hold on things, but why are you putting out records then? You know what I mean? Like with Pavement, for example, whose music is incredible, there was such this like anti-attitude, like anti-popularity or whatever, but at the same time...
You mean emanating from the band?
From the band, yeah, just in appearance and, their promo pictures, and it was all this kind of which I just found like passive-aggressive. But, Crooked Rain went gold.
Right.
So why are you allowing that? Like, don't sign to Matador Records, you know what I mean? If you really don't want to be popular... even to like a certain a demographic.
Yeah.
I always thought that if you love doing what you're doing, like who cares who likes it? Like I don't preaching to the choir gets kind of boring after a while.
Mm-hmm.
So I never had that kind of attitude where I was being kind of too nonchalant about it, or cared who exactly liked the music.
Yeah.
And at the same time, like I rejected like kind of rock stardom. You know what I mean? I didn't care about that, but there's a me. Like, I remember seeing the Pixies at the Cameo Theater on Miami Beach in '91. It was like their last tour. And that to me was just like, I was looking around the theater. It's like, this is intimate enough to where it doesn't feel like some big stadium show, but there's enough people where it creates like a lot of excitement for the band and for the audience. And you do the math. It's like they're making a decent living. I was like, that would be kind of cool.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so I always had that kind of, there's this modest kind of
it's more manageable too.
Yeah, it's realistic, and then the funny thing is,
were you confident that you would get there?
I kind of stopped caring too much. Just the old adage of like not holding on too tight,
What was occupying your thoughts when you weren't holding on too tight?
Just working on music itself, and just being happy. It's at this point, I'm in my early 30s, and I realized that higher quality of life is important. I was married, I had health insurance, and I was a junior partner per se at a resale shop called Beacon's Closet in Brooklyn. So I didn't really have a boss. Like, the primary owner was a good friend of mine, and I worked with my girlfriend, who became my wife. Worked 4 days a week, and accumulated all this vacation time so I could go away with the band, if we did regional shows, because that's what we did at first. The band formed.
You mean with Interpol?
Yeah, with Interpol. The band formed in '98, had played, the local venues in Manhattan. By the time I joined, they were doing sold-out shows already. And
it's a good time to join.
It was great. I was like, yeah, because I'm kind of tired. So I don't mind.
Make it worth my while, and then maybe we'll talk.
I had a van.
Let's back it up for a second. Yeah. So you just kind of moved to New York on a whim.
Yeah.
You were in your early 30s at that point already?
Just
or
about,
late 20s?
Like, it was about 30.
Okay. So you'd already lived a little bit.
Yeah.
And you'd already, been through the ringer and had some of your dreams crushed and some of them satisfied.
Yeah.
And so you went to New York, and what was your attitude? What were you hoping to find?
A band. I was hoping. I had left the Holy Terrors it had been like 3 years. And, I kind of started to realize that finding another band that worked in that way, where I really kind of fit in and can bring something to the fold, wasn't going to happen by answering an ad or, overnight. The way I met Daniel Kessler, Interpol's kind of his founder, guitar player, was through a friend that I worked with in Chicago, and I wanted to go see this band called Firewater, and Daniel worked for the label, and this friend of mine said, "Oh, I'll introduce you. You should meet Daniel anyway."
Mm-hmm.
And so I became friends with Daniel, and at this clothing store I ran, I had a record section. So I was buying a lot of stuff, and Daniel would give me a weekly call, just kind of give me the rundown on what Jet Set Records was putting out. And whenever he would call, we'd be on the phone for like a half hour. And there was always like, you should come and check out what we're doing, we're not happy with our drummer, and it was just this kind of, yeah, sure, and 6 months would go by, and then finally kind of realizing like how together Daniel was, I should kind of act on this and follow it up. And we met, and he gave me an EP that they had just recorded at the Rare Book Room with Nicholas. Can't remember his last name. And I was just like, oh my God, like I am joining this band. I mean, it was just what I wanted. It's what I wanted to hear at the time, let alone play.
What appealed to you about it?
The sense of atmosphere.
Hey everyone, it's Joe. You know what would really help us out? If you subscribe to The Trap Set on iTunes. You'll get free access to our archive of past interviews, and you'll be sure not to miss upcoming interviews with folks like Sheila E. and Bernard Purdy. And for the month of August, we have something extra special in store. So subscribe to The Trap Set, and everyone wins. Now back to the show. Tell me about the first time you played with them.
They were blown away. I listened to. I had like.
Were you blown away?
I was, just because I had listened to this EP, this 4-song EP, which is now referred to as the Gray EP, and goes for about $300 on eBay.
Nice. Do you have any copies?
I lost my copy.
Damn.
I listened to it like every day, and sometimes found myself not listening to it to learn it, but just getting lost in it, and I thought that was such a good sign. But I was just ready, when I stepped into the rehearsal room, I was just ready to do it, and they were taken aback. They're just like, whoa, you kind of know these songs, and
that's a good feeling when you just come in prepared.
Yeah, there was
and you lock it in.
I was just hit with like a dose of confidence that I didn't even know I had. I guess, I kind of learned to lean on my experience through the years, and it just I didn't sweat it,
You were an adult.
Yeah, bona fide.
And you joined a band with a bunch of kids.
Yeah.
Were they in college still?
No, Paul had just graduated. Daniel had graduated, and our original bass player, Carlos, he was finished. He was actually working at the university. That age thing kind of went out the door, as soon as I felt weird about it.
You felt like you were peers pretty much from the beginning.
Yeah, and I
it
enjoyed,
made sense.
It did. It made a lot of sense, and I enjoyed bringing something to the table aside from, musical skill.
Tell me about how you contribute to that band.
Arrangement ideas, mostly. Lyrics, it's all Paul.
It seems like lots of the parts that you play are very meticulously thought out. It's not like you're just grooving along and playing.
No, Interpol is very, you're going into the lab. The writing process is pretty arduous, for the better.
So the band was rising and your relationship fell apart.
Mm-hmm.
How did you navigate through that? Were you really depressed?
No, I was happy to get out of what I feared was going in a direction of like complacency. My wife then was 5 years older than me, and I don't know if she was satisfied per se with what life was handing her, but I definitely did. This is like, no, this is not my end point.
What was she doing?
Working at the store.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And she still does. She's probably makes more money than I do.
Well, she showed you.
She sure did.
Did she want to have kids? Or did you want to have kids?
No, not at
No.
the time. And she didn't either. And
Do you have kids now?
I do have a daughter.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, from my second failed marriage.
Oh, okay. Well, we have to get to that, too. What was your neurotic nonsense at that time?
Oh, just insecurities as a man.
Do you still have some of those? I mean, obviously you do.
Yeah.
Because you're still a man. But.
Yeah, I do, but they don't. Their voice is not as loud. It's just life is.
Do you think there's a like now that you're more ostensibly successful? Mm-hmm. Did that silence some of those voices?
Yeah, because you can't argue with what people give you back. You know what I mean? Like,
well, you can. Some people do.
yeah, but there's always two sides to look at. And
Yeah.
it's like I'd rather look at the brighter side of having 2 gold records, and how that happened. There's a lot of touring and reaching people. And although that's not the be-all, end-all either, like that, you have to put a little value in that.
Of course. I mean, that's what you were working towards, and you're
and-
honest enough with yourself to acknowledge that ambition.
Yeah, exactly. And if that doesn't feel good, then there's probably nothing will, except opiates or something.
Did you ever get into opiates?
I did.
Which ones?
Pills.
Oh, okay.
For a brief period. And, it was kind of frightening.
When was
actually.
that?
A few years ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
Was that after the second marriage?
It was when the second marriage was kind of falling apart.
Okay.
So it was that slippery slope where you might treat yourself every now and again, you know what I mean, with this little illicit drug. And then it was that slippery slope where it becomes like a crutch, where you're just kind of ignoring, a bad situation, and just wanting to put on that proverbial like warm blanket. Mm-hmm. So, and which then kind of aided to the demise of the marriage, because then there's really a rift. Then you're really not communicating at all, and it's hard when you're abusing a drug and you're trying to tell your partner the reason why is because of you. And it's just like, well, no, the reason why I'm not in love with you anymore is because you're a drug addict.
Right.
You know what I mean? So it's this whole awful circle, which thankfully, didn't last that long.
Is it harder for you to be on tour now that you have a daughter?
Yeah, it's awful. At the same time, like I still enjoy it so much, and it's how I provide. It means so much more. But yeah, it's to not see her every day, especially at this point where she's just changing rapidly week to week. It kind of sucks to miss that.
Do you FaceTime and stuff?
Yeah. And she's funny because she has a very, as most children do, a very narrow attention span. So she can literally go, "Hi," and look at me and laugh and go, "Okay, bye, Dad." And that kind of makes me happy because she's not pining for me. And she's not crying on the other end.
Doesn't some part of you wish she was pining for you?
No.
Okay.
No, I really,
good, you're healthy.
That would be really hard to deal with.
Yeah.
Being, it's kind of funny because, I'm working today. We're working today. It's kind of dreamy, man. This hotel room, what's going to happen tonight. It's sometimes it's work, but like I still feel privileged and lucky, and sometimes that adds this weird sense of guilt, like I'm away from my child and I'm not really working, but
the fact that she won't have to struggle as much as you did is going to like strip her of some sort of character that you have.
I don't think so. Her mom has a lot of character and has a good work ethic herself, and her mom comes from privilege and was another person that I admired, where she was like, "Yep, I came from money. I got to go to UGA, I got to move to New York. But when she moved to New York, she became a photographer, my daughter's mom, Christy, and a pretty successful one. Has a great portfolio and has photographed really interesting people over the years. She has a strong work ethic, and I think what we're doing with our child is like securing the future, but like I'm not going to give my kid money when she turns 18. It's like be wise with it, and I think the sense of accomplishment and self-gratification when you just make your own paycheck, no matter what you're doing, is something that should be experienced. So, while she won't have to like starve on the streets, like I think it's important that she learns how to provide for herself.
Did you indulge in sort of rock star debauchery?
I was dubbed Hurricane Sam.
Okay.
For early on. And it lasted about 6 months.
What materials was the hurricane comprised of?
Oh, man. Well, anything that I could whip up. That I could just, have my own velocity kind of send my way. It was just, I just wanted to experience what was going on, and about 6 months into it, I was like, oh, okay, all right.
That's all you needed?
That's all I needed. Yeah. Then I had met Christy, who became my wife and mother of my child, and I was blown away, totally in love with this person. And she was in a position in life at the time where she took off work for a year and just kind of met me all over the world. We would end a tour in New Zealand, and I'd fly her over. And we'd spend a week in New Zealand or Australia or England or wherever. So that became way more exciting than, doing rails of cocaine in some dirty bathroom with a couple of hot chicks, or drinking vodka out of the bottle with Josh Homme or whatever.
You drink vodka out of the bottle with Josh Homme?
I think more than once.
Yeah?
Yeah.
If you run into him again, will that happen? Is that just kind of your thing, you two?
I know that he loves vodka, so I would probably make sure there was some close by.
Okay.
'Cause he's a good distant friend. I don't see him very often. I don't talk to him very often. But when we're around, it's like
it's bad news.
It's a lot of fun.
Well, I think that's a great place to end it. Sam Fogarino, thanks so much for being here.
Ah, my pleasure.
The Trap Set is produced by me, Joe Wong, along with Chris Karwowski, who also edits the program. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at The Trap Set, and visit our website, thetrapset.net, to subscribe to our show for free. If you enjoyed what you heard today, please donate to our show. If you can't afford to donate, please tell a friend and give us a good rating on iTunes. Send your feedback and guest requests to thetrapset@gmail.com.